Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what's up, bro?
Not too much, brother. Today we're going to be chatting about a study finding that patients who undergo sex changes are over 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. Record level of terror suspects being caught at the US border coming from Canada and far outpacing Mexico. Witnesses telling Congress that the UN report clearing the UNRWA of terror ties is a complete lie. Canada bracing for prolonged decline in living standards. Pierre Poilievre calling on Trudeau's government to give Canadians a quote-unquote summer break on all federal gas taxes, as well as no expert consensus on AI risks being found, with the trajectory remarkably uncertain. However, if before we get into things, you wouldn't mind subscribing to our channel or leaving us a kind review on Spotify, wherever you're listening, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, let's get started. So first off, we've got a study finding that patients who undergo sex changes are over 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. A comprehensive study by researchers at the University of Texas has debunked claims by transgender activists that undergoing a sex change prevents suicide. The findings revealed that individuals who underwent gender affirmation surgery had a significantly higher risk of attempts, 12 times higher, compared to those who sought care without the surgery. So what were some of the other findings from this study?
Okay, so if we look at the study, there's actually a few sets of data, but we'll look at two in particular. One is just looking at people that have had gender affirming surgery, and then just people who have not. So anybody random like you or I. And what they found was people who have undergone gender affirmation surgery were 12.1 times more likely to attempt suicide. They were 3.35 times more likely to have died. These patients had a 9.88 times greater risk of self-harm, and they also had a 7.76 times higher risk of PTSD. So that's pretty wild. And again, that's just people that have gone through gender affirming surgery and then just regular folks. Now, the other one that I thought was more interesting, though, is they did something called propensity matching. So what they do is they compare individuals with sort of similar characteristics. And so what they did for this one was they took patients who underwent gender-affirming surgery, of course, and then the control group were adults who had either tubal ligation or vasectomy, but no gender-affirming surgery. Now, I understand that those may be slightly skewed, but at least you're kind of getting into the realm of people that are taking that step, right? So here are the key findings. People who had undergone gender affirmation surgery were 5.44 times more likely to attempt suicide or self-harm. They were 2.37 times higher chance of being deceased, and they were 3.74 times higher chance of having PTSD. So even when you look at something that has got a propensity match or something comparative, it's still alarming. So for starters, I think we just need to admit how fucked up this is. Whether it's 12 times or 5 times more likely to attempt suicide, these are wild figures. And look, like the data doesn't lie. People do, right? And that's exactly what's been happening here. We're being gaslit into believing that any pushback against this narrative is bigotry, but it's simply not the case. In fact, it's the opposite. And I kind of want to highlight something here, though, because this topic is so divided. And I think that people feel like you're on the team or off the team, and there's no nuance, and they think that it's offensive if you talk about it, and you're a bigot if you do. You know what I mean? If you don't sort of agree with everything. So I kind of just wanted to lay something out there. Like, I understand that these studies can be upsetting for some people. I think it's easy to perceive these findings as insensitive, lacking compassion, politically charged, which they often are, or even falling into the realm of some sort of phobic. But that's not the case. And it's not why we share this information. In fact, I believe withholding this data would be the true act of lacking compassion. And I mean, our stance is pretty clear. I think you and I see things the same way. Children should be left alone, while adults should have the freedom to make whatever decision they want. However, making these decisions requires being fully informed. I think informed consent is something we've sort of forgotten about over the last few years, especially through the pandemic. You were sort of made into a pariah if you wanted all the information, which is wild. But let's be realistic. I mean, it's a cornerstone of ethical medical practice, and it's essential that people have all the necessary data to understand the potential outcome of their choices, which I don't feel like they're getting. And again, this is why I want to sort of highlight these things and talk about these things. So to reiterate, sharing this information is not about creating fear or stigma. It's about honesty and transparency. And by sharing these studies, we aim to equip everyone with the knowledge that they need to make these well-informed decisions, whether it's for you or a family member. You know what I mean? You look at a lot of these parents that are dealing with this right now, and, oh my God, what do I do? My child's going to school, and this is what they're being taught in the education system right now. I have to confirm this. Well, now you have this information if you feel like maybe it's not the right thing, because it's probably not. Anyway, I'm of the mind that true compassion really involves providing people with all the information so that they can weigh their options carefully and responsibly, not gaslighting, canceling, or attacking people who challenge unscientific and rather dogmatic ideology. And I think, one of the things I'd wrap it up with is to say, let's remember that good ideas will stand up to challenge and scrutiny. So if you run into anyone who's peddling a narrative that won't allow for objection, you've found a bad idea.
Yeah, if you find somebody that can't take criticism or even question their own beliefs, then you've found the tyrant, right? If everything is just, you have to take it at face value and there's no pushback at all, it's kind of goes along with this idea that, the truth is never afraid of being questioned or ridiculed because it can stand up to its to whoever is doing so. And so it's only ever on the backs of lies that you get into this very aggressive area where it becomes super contentious. And to what you were saying, like you should have 100% compassion for the people that are going through these. It is impossible to differentiate between people that have severe mental anguish and people that have transgenderism. They're one in the same. Not saying that everybody that has severe mental anguish is transgender, but I'm saying it does go the other way.
I think it's why I actually think it's important to highlight that up until 2019, both the WHO and Canada and most of the Western world considered transgenderism as a mental illness. You know what I mean? And there's a reason for it. And it's been reclassified in Peru again as a mental illness. And it's interesting because they say, oh, well, we just have more information. It's like, well, actually, there's actually no strong scientific data to change the opinion on this. There's nothing to really substantiate that. So no, I know what you're saying. It's like not all people that have that are mentally ill, but it's definitely a big part of it.
The vast majority had not only just underlying mental conditions, whether it be severe stress, abuse at home, missing schools, and so on, but the average had 5 conjoining factors of those other issues. And so to me, it's like if you were to say, look at it like another mental issue, let's say it be schizophrenia. It's like, it's not compassion. You can have compassion for somebody that's suffering from schizophrenia and go, wow, that would be a very tough life to live.
Right.
We should probably do something to either alleviate the suffering that this person is doing, or if we can, it seems like an impossible task, but try to find out some sort of program that at least brings them back or mitigates or stops the furthering of
you do what you can to try to help them, rid them of you do what you can to try to quell the symptoms the right way. Yeah.
But compassion isn't telling that person that, yes, the voices in your head are real.
Yeah.
Listen to them.
Totally.
It's
agree.
like so this other aspect that we've got onto this. And I am of the mind where I'm like, I'm kind of bored of talking about this topic on a cultural issue, like the whole can men be men and can women be
This is so dumb.
Can men be women and whatever. Yeah, it's like I think the vast majority of people are just over that concept.
For sure.
And they're just no, I'm not playing this game anymore. But I do worry about the fact that like we're still continuing on with these programs and these treatments, well, quote unquote treatments, and you're like, hey, we need to question our entire medical system when, like you were pointing out, that the idea, even the concept of informed consent seems to have just gone out the window. How can you trust the medical establishments at these points after what we've seen over the last few years?
You can't, right? And I think why they're continuing with these programs is exactly what you said. People are getting sick of it. They're like, look, guys can't be girls. Enough of this shit. But that's where they stopped. But all those people that are pushing that agenda, they're going to keep their foot on the gas. So you kind of have to continue pushing back. It's like evil's always knocking on your door. You know what I mean? They don't go away. I know that may be a little hyperbolic, but it's the truth.
Yeah, and so to me, this just becomes kind of symbolic of a much larger issue. It's which is the entire medical establishment, which is just either, if it's not captured by financial incentives, then it's completely captured by ideological ones. And this is something that we're even seeing in other institutions as well. I was just talking to somebody in the teaching world, and they were talking about how like their hands are completely tied, that they don't get to do the things that they know would be good for their classroom because they're tied by administrators. It's like, hey, we're tossing you this essentially step by step of what you need to do when anything happens. And it's like the individual judgment is completely gone, and it's just top down rule in these institutions now.
Yeah, I think the medical association, I think like the medical institution is just one more example of that, but I don't think it has to do anything. I don't think it really has much to do with an ideological lean. I think they're just using that to their advantage.
You don't think the transgender stuff in medicine has any ideological lean?
I think big pharma themselves are just purely profit driven.
Yeah.
I think what they're doing is, I think that they work sort of in tandem with governments, and I think they ride cultural waves. I think that's what it is. I don't think they give a shit about any of it. You know what I mean? I think they care more about how do we make money. And I think they almost like plant seeds or pull levers and see which one actually activates. I think that's how they do a lot of these things. Because the thing is, I hear what you're saying, but yes, there's money in it. Yes, the medical association is making this kind of money. But they made a lot more off a pandemic than they're making off transgenderism. You know what I mean? And you're not really going to be able to convert that many people. And if you look at what happened in the UK, that already fell apart. So this narrative is already flatlining. Mm-hmm. So they're making their money while they can, and then they're going to move on to the next health crisis, right? That's what they're going to do. So for me, I just kind of see this as like they're taking advantage of a situation because they just they wade in these waters, man. These people are sharks. They wait, and then when they have an opportunity, some sort of cultural opportunity, they fucking attack. And once they've killed their prey, they move on. That's what they do. So for me, I think that there is definitely an ideological lean involved in the transgender topic, but not driven by big pharma. They're just there cleaning up the mess, making the money.
I think it's a little bit more intertwined than that, because even, for instance, with JIDS, what you ended up seeing was the pharma companies were sponsoring and throwing the events that activists would be at with doctors.
For sure.
And they were essentially putting them in the same room. So it's like, okay, we have this group that supports a intervention that would raise our profits, so I am going to financially supply that group in order to more or less lobby the medical institution to take our solution.
Well, that's exactly what I see. Yeah, I think they're saying, okay, if I do this, if I put in, it's an ROI thing. If I put in $10 million into this activism, then it's going to create $100 million for me in profit. Cool, that's what I'm going to do. So I think that's what they're mainly doing. I think they're tapped in with governments across the board, obviously. And like you said last time, big pharma doesn't advertise on TV and in the media because that's their best avenue. They do it so that they own them, so they can't talk shit about them. It's just another one of those things that they do, man. But like, as you said last time, they have the largest criminal fines of all organizations in the world, right? So I think it's just part of their game.
Like it sounds extremely harsh to say, but there needs to be legal repercussions massively on this front, especially when it comes to the transgender stuff. I think anybody that has been directly involved in transitioning kids and putting these surgeries on in kids, the amount of kids that have gone through top surgery is actually a lot lower than I think most people would believe. But there is thousands upon thousands of kids who are now infertile because they've been put on hormone blockers and all this kind of stuff. And hey, when you're a doctor, you signed on to the Hippocratic Oath that you will do no harm. And this is like, you are castrating kids for the rest of their lives. You have done irreparable harm to these kids. And I'm sorry, ignorance isn't a legal defense.
I agree with you. However, here's what's going to happen. Nothing.
Yeah.
And here's why. Because it's supported by the government narrative, right? They're doing, like, we talked about this, like, I don't know, a few episodes ago, where you get into this thing where doctors basically can't have their own opinions anymore. They just have to toe the government line, because if they go against it, they're going to lose their license. That's basically what it's become. So now doctors go, well, if the government says it's okay, that's what I can do. I can walk down that line, because we all know the government never admits fault, right? So when you look at it this way, you go, well, if the doctor's now getting fined for what they've done, that means the government was wrong. Now insurance companies have to get involved. So now if you're liable as a doctor, who's going to get involved? Who's going to be a doctor? We already have a shortage now, but if they're getting fined and losing licenses for something the government said was okay, how are you going to continue to?
Oh, I'd go further than just fine.
But you know what I mean? You look at that, you kind of go, well, if you look at that, you go, oh, the institution itself Health Canada would fall.
Yeah.
We'd have nothing left, because no one would be a part of the system anymore. So they can't let that happen. So they'll just keep blowing hot air into this bullshit that they're continuing to do. But that's kind of the system we're a part of, right? If the government says it's okay, the doctors can do it, and they're never going to go back on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like when they used to do lobotomies, man. They just knock out the front part of your brain. What? Yeah. Those guys didn't get in any trouble. These people aren't going to either. It's a broken system. But again, this is why it's so important to have these conversations and give people this information. So like I said, they have actual informed consent. because once again, the data doesn't lie, only people do.
For sure. Yeah, if anybody other than somebody in a white lab coat was doing these things, if the government walked in on a family and it was like, oh, my kid said they were the other gender, and so we did a little surgery in our back, even if they did it, let's say 100% perfectly, nailed the surgery,
which they still can't do,
did the mastectomy or whatever, and everybody would look at that and be like, oh my God, what have you done?
Yeah,
but just because the
turn
person
your child into a Frankenstein.
But just because the person was wearing a white lab coat, all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is top medical practice.
We're just affirming their gender. We're doing the right thing. No, you are not.
All right, our second story for the day, we've got record level of terror suspects being caught at the U.S. border coming from Canada, and now we are far outpacing Mexico. So U.S. border officials are sounding the alarm over concerns about a significant increase in known or suspected terrorists attempting to cross into the United States from Canada, far surpassing similar attempts at the southern border with Mexico. The data revealed a record high in the number of individuals with terrorist ties detained by U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents at the northern border. In the fiscal year of 2023, 484 such individuals were apprehended, exceeding the previous record of 313 in fiscal year 2022. Former CBP chief Mark Morgan highlighted the vulnerabilities of the northern border, citing the ease of entry into Canada, often without a visa requirement, which is clearly facilitating terrorist entries into the U.S. Cartels are also exploiting this route for drug trafficking and human smuggling operations. So why is nobody talking about how criminal and terrorist organizations are taking advantage of Canada's border failures?
Well, because it's something that would make the government look bad. So they do their best to cover these things up, right? So you get an opportunity to look at these reports once in a while, but they're just going to look at the number and they're going to brush under the rug and not pay any attention to it. But what I thought was kind of interesting is when you compare the numbers between Mexico and Canada. So according to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, there were nearly 190,000 illegal immigrants that were encountered at the Canadian border in 2023. And there were 484 terrorists that were apprehended. So 190,484. We compare those numbers to Mexico. Border Patrol said that there were a record number of encounters at the U.S.-Mexico border, exceeding 2.4 million in 2023, yet only 169 terrorists were apprehended. Now, if we're to pair that ratio of 2.4 million as the common denominator, Canada would be responsible for allowing 6,113 terrorist suspects into the U.S., which when directly compared to Mexico's 169, means that they're only letting in one terrorist per capita compared to 30 for Canada. So a 30-to-1 ratio per capita. Now, of course, this is just an exercise, and there are circumstances that can alter this data, like the number of Border Patrol members or the volume of immigrants being stopped upon entry. So I know that this is a little offside, but I think it's just interesting to look at that because it kind of gets to this point, which is, I think it's safe to say that Canada has become an established or perhaps even preferred route for terrorists, criminals, and the cartel to enter the United States. So another egg on the face of Canadians.
Yeah, our asylum laws are extremely lax. Like, people can just show up without any papers, say that they're an asylum seeker. And I mean, we know how the government operates. Hell, I fought a traffic ticket 6 months ago and I still haven't got even processed back about being like, oh, here's what we're going to do about it.
Oh, God.
And then so you look at this and you go, okay, well, they just let them in the meantime. And they go, yeah, we're processing you. You just go stay at this hotel. We'll pay for everything. It's completely fine. But then those people, if their entire intention all along was just to get into the United States, they just bail. They just dip. It's like, okay, cool. We'll see you never.
Yeah.
And this, like, it's mind-boggling to me that people think it's a very humanitarian thing to just allow this to happen, that it's like, oh, struggling people. And you go,
I think people have the wrong perception of what the situation that most of these people are in. I think that's what it comes down to. I think if you ask them, they'd go, oh, a starving young child that barely has enough clothing and is not wearing any shoes. That's the picture they're going to draw for you. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm. And this has been going on for a long time, but it's been just getting worse and worse and worse as well. But like even back into the 90s and stuff, criminal organizations, there was one from China called the Big Circle Boys that was human trafficking through Canada's asylum programs, where they would send girls over here without papers and all of this kind of stuff, and then say, hey, okay, just go through the program. This is what you're going to do. And then they would have somebody from the criminal organization that is already embedded in Canada come and pick them up afterwards. And then now they are sex slaves in Canada. And you're like, this is not humanitarian. Or you look down too at what's going on in the States. 50 to 60% of the women that have talked about going into America to seek asylum claims and doing that long trek through the Darien Gap and up through Southern America and Central America, 50 to 60% of them report getting raped along the way. You're like,
holy shit.
You're not in a humanitarian position saying open borders. Like, it turns into a literal human smuggling operation. And two, people will look at, say, the kids that get detained and stuff. And yes, that is a horrible sight, but their solution is, okay, well, just allow them in. But what people don't realize is happening as well is, and this is so dark, man, is in those countries, a lot of people will essentially rent their kids to people that want to get across the border, because if you have kids with you, it's a lot easier. Yeah. So like, these kids are being essentially sold as like mules to get lighter sentences or easier asylum seeking. Right. And like, this is not compassionate. And so you look at these problems and it's so crazy to me that on the surface, everybody just runs around thinking they're such a good person for saying that, yes, we should have these extremely easy asylum programs. But you look at the actual consequences of what happens on the ground when these things are in place, and you just go, it's utterly devastating for everybody along the way.
I mean, nobody wins. That's the big thing. Is it's weird that it's become like a political pawn to use to score partisan points, because if you actually do the math, nobody gets ahead. It's this weird thing that is framed as compassionate, but like you said, there's no real upside for anybody. There are a few people that, yes, we're in a very dire situation and life is better here, but they're like, to that picture that I drew for people, very few people are in that particular situation. And the problem is, it's like all that these organizations do, these criminal organizations that are doing around the world, understand the system and they're just leveraging them. But yeah, I mean, and then you look at things like this and you kind of go, well, if that many people are coming from Canada that are on terror watch lists into the US specifically, and based on the ratio coming from Canada, it seems like they have intention. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm using this route because I know there's a better chance of getting through. And then when I'm there, I'm going to do what? And I look at these numbers, and I don't know, if I were America, I'd be pretty concerned.
For sure.
You know what I mean? You kind of look at what's happening here, and I realize that's a different part of the sim. Like, they're using this as a conduit. But now that there's that many people there, what is next for America? What does it look like for them? Because these numbers, they've caught 484.
Yeah.
Right? But there was 190,000 people that went through. And if you do the math on that, it's like about 0.25% that they caught. I have to imagine that at least 3 or 4 times that got through that they didn't catch. And I imagine the numbers are similar down in Mexico, maybe worse. So it's like, what impending doom does America have coming?
Well, and even their federal intelligence has been warning Canada, been like, hey, you guys need to do something about this.
Yeah.
And the Canadian government has just been like, I don't think we do. I don't think
it's your
we
problem
really
now,
do,
guys.
But then you even look at, like, on the ground, even day to day, it's like I had somebody recently talk about how that they need to completely change the security of their business operations because they have pieces of equipment just being stolen like crazy. Like, it was always kind of a thing here or there. Maybe once a season it would happen where a piece of heavy equipment would get stolen. But they had 2 last month, and each one of those things is tens of thousands of dollars, right? So you're just like, now they have to re-up their entire security program because these things are just getting worse and worse and worse. But yeah, people don't want to make that connection, and it is gross because you get called, whether it be xenophobic or any of these things, and it's just like, okay, I guess then it's like, I don't know.
Well, which one's worse? I don't want people to keep stealing my shit, so I guess call me whatever you need to.
Yeah. All right, moving on to the third story of the day, we've got witnesses telling Congress that the UN report clearing the UNRWA of terror ties is a complete lie. 3 expert witnesses criticized a recent UN investigation known as the Kelowna Report into the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees. They testified before a House Foreign Affairs subcommittee chaired by Chris Smith, claiming that the report was biased in favor of the UNRWA and failed to address serious allegations of the agency's ties to Hamas. The witnesses argued that the investigation was conducted by individuals sympathetic to UNRWA, which undermined its impartiality. They also highlighted concerns about UNRWA's management and accountability, citing instances where the agency employed individuals associated with Hamas despite U.S. laws prohibiting funding for such groups. The hearing faced disruptions from pro-Palestine demonstrations, but continued after police cleared the chamber. So why do we keep allowing these organizations to investigate themselves and then believe them when they said they've done nothing wrong?
I think it's because the people that are allowing them to investigate themselves are also corrupt. Right? I think it's become pretty clear. I mean, like just last week, you shared a couple of videos with me. Israel released a video showing that Hamas terrorists were using UN vehicles and an UNRWA logistics compound in Eastern Rafah. There's another video you shared with me showing Hamas terrorists coming out of a UN logistics center and shooting at Gazan civilians in Eastern Rafah. So it's very like, there's no question here. It's just a matter of how intertwined are they? We don't know, right? And look, the organization is corrupt. There's no question. The organization in charge of them is equally or more corrupt, which you and I went over a few episodes ago. And what's worse is Canada just agreed to give them another $65 million. I think that hits a total of $165 million now, the lion's share of which is going to the UNRWA. So you kind of look at this and you go, what's happening here? Are we funding both sides of this war?
It's like that quote from Age of Ultron, the Avengers movie, where Ultron says at one point, he's like, I have a theory to keep your friends rich, keep your enemies rich, and then waiting to find out which one is which. And it's like, it's very true. That's exactly what's happening right now. And
nice.
Anybody that is looking at what's going on in Gaza, from a simple perspective, all of this aid gets directed through Hamas. Nothing in Gaza goes on without Hamas's.
Well, what I think that people don't realize is they were the governing organization. So if money is going there, they're the governing organization. What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah. And then so you look at the entire GDP of Gaza is worth, they had a record year, which was like $19.11 billion. And then the lowest it's gotten to is in the single digits of billions. But then you look at the net worth of Hamas leadership and they're into the tens of billions. And you go, this doesn't make sense. How could you guys ever possibly have the net worth of your entire GDP?
Good for you.
So, of course, they're just stealing these funds and or whether they're also, obviously, they're getting funded by other places like Iran and such. But yeah, it's like we're 100% funding terrorists at this point. We're letting terrorists go through our border into America. We're giving them money. None of this makes any sense.
Isn't it so wild? You know, it's funny. Every once in a while, I take this sort of macro or aerial view of how fucked up everything is in politics. And I just go, how could we possibly fix it? It's such a disaster. Every single organization they have is corrupt or broken. Every move they make is corrupt or for some sort of nefarious purpose. How do you fix it? That it's become so big, so large, and so bureaucratic that the only thing it can do anymore is just keep itself alive. How do we fix it? Mm-hmm. The purpose is to make Canada a better place. That's the whole idea of the government. Every government is to improve society. All it is our biggest burden, and it's fucking everything up. What could we possibly do? How do people in the 21st century fix their governments? Because they're all this big a disaster. What do we do? They're all bloated, huge mess. How do we fix it?
And it's tough too, because you do look at it in, it's kind of that, it's like that out of a few good men with Jack Nicholson, right? He's like, you need people like me on the wall, because he's getting on trial for corruption and abuse of military authority. But he's like, hey, you need me to do these things because you guys get to sit behind this wall and feel safe and comfortable all day. And then by no means am I excusing the corruption that we have in our world, but you do kind of sometimes sit there and think okay, if we're on a geopolitical stance and we're lined up against places like China and Iran, and you go, we have to compete against these people on the international stage. So there's essentially a game being played there, right? But we know that those parties aren't following the rules. They don't give a shit about this kind of stuff or international law or human rights or any of these kind of things.
Climate change.
Yeah. So then it's like, okay, do we allow ourselves to be hindered by our own principles? It's like if you get into a fight and it's like, okay, the rules are established in a boxing match, but you have one guy that goes into there and goes, I don't give a fuck about those
I brought
views.
a knife to the fight.
Yeah. And then it's
okay.
okay, now do I have to?
Well, here's the thing though. I would agree if they're like, hey guys, look, everyone gather around. Here's what's going on. China's beating us because they have a different political system where they get to weaponize basically authoritarianism and then create these little capitalism cities that can basically leverage, their resources to the world. And they're winning the game here. They're playing chess. We're playing checkers. Okay, got it. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to team up and we're going to play a similar game. And this is how we're going to go about it. Instead, what they're doing is they're just being corrupt for their own benefit.
Yeah.
So they're being equally, if not more corrupt, but only in ways that benefit them, which is basically turning this into an oligarchy, right? So it's like they're not actually being corrupt in ways that benefit us. They're only doing it in ways that benefit them because they're going, well, those guys are corrupt too, so we can be corrupt. But we're just going to do it to benefit ourselves. How about fuck you?
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that's where the problem is. And I'm also of the mind too, where I'm like, hey, live by the sword, die by the sword. If we're going to sit here and say that these principles of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of mobility, all of these things, human rights, that we conduct ourselves in a way that, we actually have genuine care for just human life, the individual, that this isn't just that the individual doesn't exist for the sake of society and therefore collateral damage is just completely fine and whatever. Then, I think if you're going to live by those principles, then you have to also be willing to die by those principles. And it's like, you can't just all of a sudden, when it doesn't suit you and you come up against somebody without principles, that you can just dispense with all of your own and then be like, okay, cool.
No, I agree with you. It's kind of like the moral philosophy thing. It's like, if you're going to, it's like the same thing with free speech though, right? You get into a lot of these conversations. It's like, you have to support it when it doesn't suit you. Otherwise, it has no significance, right?
So anyways, what I'm getting at there, I guess, is that I am pretty over the corruption, despite the fact that there might be practical or utility reasons for it.
Well, again, I think 10% of the utility makes sense. I think 90% of it is just to benefit themselves.
Yeah,
I think that's all this is. And it's become so blatantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand how people it's weird, right? Because they'll pander to liberals by saying, well, you can say whatever you want. We're going to censor these other people. You can be whatever you want. And we're going to tell these other people they're bigots. That's how they're winning this cultural war right now. Because if anybody that's like a diehard liberal pays attention to the economy or what the government's doing, they're like, oh no, these people are corrupt cunts. What the fuck's going on here? So it's just a matter of they're having the wool pulled over their eyes and they're winning the culture war. So they think it's okay. These people just have to wake up. That's the big problem we have today. Anyway, the real problem I have, or that my family has, is how long do we stick it out? How long do you stay here? And I don't think it's very long. Mm-hmm. I think it's, look, I know there's going to be problems other places, but I kind of want to go to a place that's smaller, where the government has less power, can do less. Just as a smaller organization, I'm less concerned. You know what I mean?
And again, I'm not of the mind where there is any necessarily the grass is greener other places. It's just the idea that you get to choose your problems everywhere, and everyone will have problems. You just get to choose which ones are the ones that you face. And the ones that we're staring down the barrel at in Canada here, I'm not so willing to do anymore when we've got a government that will lock us up for years and for 2 years in our homes, plus steal 50 to 60% of my cash, and just not down with it.
Well, it goes back to your moral philosophy. If you have these set of rules, you got to stick to them. If you're in a place that won't allow you to have them, you have one of two choices: leave or fight. I don't think we can win a fight against the government.
No.
I don't think we got the parts.
Not in Canada.
No. Well, exactly.
American citizens might be able to.
Maybe, but the thing is, it's a dumpster fire down there too in its own way, right? Again, you can go down there because you can say, hey, at least America represents what's important to me. So I can go down there and I can live there and do these things and have your free speech and all this other stuff. But like you said, you got to pick your poison. You can do that down there. Mind you, there is a case right now in the Supreme Court. It's pending decision on whether or not to give government more control over social media. You know what I mean? The Republicans obviously were saying no, free speech. Hey, if it's a public forum, you can't censor social media platforms at all. Let everybody say whatever they want, especially when it comes to political speech. And the Democrats are saying, no. We need more power. Give more power to the government. They're going to keep things democratic. So we'll see how that goes, because if that does go in the favor of the Democrats, which I don't think it will, because the Supreme Court is weighed in the Republican favor right now. But if it does, that dramatically changes the landscape in the United States, right?
For sure.
That makes it also one of those places where it's like, oh, I can't say shit here either. Great. What am I going to do now?
Also, just the world too, because America right now is kind of the example and the trendsetter for the entire Western world. So, for instance, I think if we didn't have certain states like Florida and Texas and such you had one other example with Sweden, but if you didn't have a lot of these areas in America to point to with the pandemic stuff and say, hey, look, they're all partying and they're completely fine. Their death rate is the exact same per capita as what we're doing. Why are we locked down?
Ruining our lives.
If you don't have that example, I don't think we in Canada would have came out of our restrictions nearly as much, because you had to be able to point to somebody else first and say, hey, what you're doing doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah, well, the thing is, that's why, like, so Meg and I talk about this frequently, but where to go. And this is why I don't take the US off the list yet, because even though it's fucked in its own way, and there's a lot of violence down there, and the political unrest could be out of this world in the next 8 months. But the thing is, they do have a lot of the other things that suit my moral philosophy, right? The way I see the world and what I think is important. So that's why it is sort of on that list. But, you know, what we kind of realize is that there's other places that are like that too, right? The only thing you have to be concerned about is any of these smaller places, like they could, like you look at something like Panama. Now, I think that because of the Panama Canal, they're pretty safe, but they could nationalize. They could pull a Venezuela. You know, you look at these places, you don't really know what's going to happen all the time. So that's the only thing, is you could get a tyrannical government in a place that's small enough. So you have to find a place that's got stability, but then also allows you that same thing. And it's kind of crazy to say, but like, we're running out of places in the world that allow you to be yourself if you don't fit into the political mold, whatever the political mold du jour is, you know what I mean? Which we don't. We're just kind of running out of options, which is fucking wild.
I will just say, if Panama ever decides to nationalize, they would be getting some militarized democracy real quick.
Yeah, no. I agree. I agree. I just use them as an example because they're a place that are on our list that I consider. But it's also one of those things that it has come to mind. I've been like, you know what, though, you got to be concerned about places that don't have complete stability, because they are a little more vulnerable to sort of political overthrow.
There is certain places though, like Panama, which they kind of have third-party stability from America because
the canal.
With the canal,
it's so significant.
It's so significant to international trade that America's like, no, we're not letting anything happen.
It's a bit of a safety net, and that's one of the reasons why I do like it. And you know, they've had a solid free economy for a long time. They allow you to do a lot of things down there, like with regenerative medicine and stuff, which is important to me. So I actually really do like it. And it's not even that hard to go down there. I think if you make an investment of about $200,000 US and buy property, you're good. Like you get a card, you're in.
Wow.
So it's not too challenging. Obviously, you have to have a bit more income or prove that you can make money. And if you make money online or outside of Panama, there's no taxes. Like it's a good system. So again, it's on the list. It's just, I think for us, it's a matter of how quickly do we want to move and what does that threshold look like? There's interesting things happening in Italy, actually. They're really giving places away and giving people money to move there. Like a lot of cities there are because of a declining birth rate, right? And the thing is, I like what Melani's doing over there, but at the same time, they're part of the EU. And the shit that's happening there, it's weird. So,
and they also took money from China for the Belts and Roads Initiative.
Yeah, I think I thought that they were backing out on that. I thought that Melani actually backed out on that deal.
That'd be good.
But the thing is, though, they're still a part of the EU. And what I find interesting about that is like post-nationalized. Like they are all like not really their own countries anymore. Like I understand why Brexit happened. If you look at how Ursula von der Leyen behaves and what the EU does and how they like hold money. Like, do you see what they do in Poland? So there was a government there that was not pro-EU. They held billions of dollars of their assets. And now there's a pro-EU government. They're like, you can have all your money back. What the fuck is happening?
Yeah, man.
So that's what concerns me about the European Union in general, is I can like those countries, but to do the things that you and I do and to say what we say and want to and have that moral philosophy, I don't even know if that place is safe either, because they're sort of under the umbrella of the overlords of the EU. So I don't even know if anywhere in Europe is safe right now.
Yeah, and people tried to make the whole Brexit thing into a xenophobic idea and whatever, but at the end of the day, what Brexit really came down to was that idea of self-governance. It's like,
I think it was also economics. Yeah.
But it's like, it really came down to that fundamental idea of we want to put in place our own policies. We don't want you guys to be like some bureaucracy, be able to come up with a policy and shove it down our throats or financially blackmail us if we don't do what they say.
Yeah.
I mean, even
same thing in Hungary. Yeah, exactly.
And then you actually look, and now this is a little bit more tinfoil hatty, but the recent president of Slovakia got shot, and he was very much against the migration quotas that the EU was shoving down their throats. You also look at you look at all of these political leaders that push back against that globalization strategy, whether it be the Japanese leader that got stabbed, he was, and there was so many reports at the same time where far right leader in Japan gets stabbed. Same thing with Bolsonaro back in like 2018, 2019. And hey, I'm not necessarily endorsing any of these people. I don't know their policies or their platforms well enough, but I'm just saying it's a very weird trend that these people who stand up against these mega globalized institutions, that they all usually end up getting attacked.
Yeah, so the Slovakian president, he actually denounced the WHO pandemic treaty like day or two before. I think it's blasted 5 times in the chest by a known political opponent. So that guy that shot him was not a part of a political party, but he was like a zealot supporter of the other party.
Yeah.
So it was just like, it's challenging not to question it when these things happen, right?
For
because
sure.
You don't see any left-wing leaders. It doesn't seem to be happening, even though they're the ones implementing all these harmful policies. Mm-hmm. So it's a little strange. It's tough. It's crazy times, man.
Well, it is, especially when you see all of our countries. It's like they will say, "Oh, we need to completely overhaul social media," like the RCMP. We were just covering it in the last episode, where the RCMP wanted to make it so that we have to crack down on people that say dangerous things about politicians on social media channels. But then, there's no push for protection on the other front. I mean, even too, when you see, for instance, RFK getting denied Secret Service down in the States, and you go, there doesn't seem to be any legitimate physical protection. It's like, we want to protect all liberal or all politicians that are on board with the globalization efforts. We want to protect their feelings. But then when it comes to physical violence against the opposition, it's like, just go right ahead.
It's pretty wild. Yeah, it's interesting. It's like this there is sort of this, it's cultural, but it's also physical warfare against the opposition. But it's so weird because they paint the Republicans and conservatives in the far right as these dangerous Nazis. That's what they do. But it's like, they're the ones committing the violence and causing all the problems. Mm-hmm. Cool. Little double speak.
Yeah. All right, next story for the day. We've got Canada bracing for prolonged decline in living standards. Chrystia Freeland's optimistic view of Canada's economy contrasts sharply with recent findings from the Fraser Institute. Their study reveals a concerning trend: a decline in living standards since 2019, as measured by per capita GDP, which is the value of all goods and services produced in the country divided by the population. The study's co-author, Grady Munro, stresses the significance of this decline, stating that if per capita GDP doesn't recover this year, it would represent the longest and largest decline in the last 4 decades. The inflation-adjusted per-person GDP dropped from $59,905 to $58,111 between April 2019 and the end of 2023, a 3% decrease. Munro also pointed out that the impact of population growth on per capita GDP, noting that while the economy may grow, individual living standards can still decline if population outpaces economic output. Looking ahead, the report stresses the need for government reforms similar to those implemented in the early 1990s to reverse this trend. These reforms would include fiscal responsibility, tax relief to spur investment, and a shift away from market interference. So is this economic state Canada's new normal?
Yeah, for at least the next decade, I would suggest so. And, here's a big reason why. Canada's productivity is lagging behind almost all other developed nations. And here's just sort of a few stats. Canada falls outside the top 10 in productivity rankings among all OECD nations. Canada's productivity is significantly lower than that of the US. In 2022, Canada produced only 71% of the value the US economy generated per hour worked. The Canadian economy also relies on some less productive sectors like retail and accommodation. However, these industries are currently on a downward trend due to the shortage of disposable income. And compared to some other countries, Canada is lagging in investments that drive innovation and efficiency, something that will be getting significantly worse between now and 2027 due to Canada's substantial increase in taxes on new business investments across the Canadian economy. These measures were introduced in Trudeau's 2024 budget and are expected to reduce both investment and productivity at a time when they are critically needed. I mean, the other thing is we're also poised to let in a record-setting number of immigrants over the next 3 years. What is it, 500,000 per year, 24, 25, and 26 permanent residents, plus the non-permanent, which are probably literally triple those numbers. So, like he said in the report, even if the economy gets better, by letting this many people in, our standard of living is going to continue to go down.
So
I think it's a tough 10 years ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, and there doesn't seem to be any slow on that, right? I mean, they're saying that their goals for immigration are just going to continue forward, and whether it be housing or even just economy, like we're seeing right now, it's like it's impossible not to or crime, like we were talking about earlier. This seems to be a very major. Like if you were to boil it down to, let's say, 3 to 5 problems that are causing the most mayhem in Canada, this would be hard to not put at number 1. And we're even seeing too, just like the societal divide of what's happening. There was one of the True North reporters actually recently went over to PEI to cover there was a bunch of student protesters, like foreign students that were protesting for permanent residence and saying that they should be allowed to stay after they're done studying. And the reporter was kind of pushing them on it a little bit. He was like, do you think that there's space? Like, do you think, like, I'm talking to people around PEI and they're saying, like, where are we going to put all these people? And the guy was like, brother, are you even from here? And he's like, yeah, I was just like, in my head, I was like, that's such a wild thing to say at that moment where, like, of course, yeah, I don't know where this guy lives, but I think he was just visiting there to report on it.
Yeah.
But still, it's like, you're an international student and you're trying to say that a Canadian can't question whether they should live there because they don't live in that direct municipality. And it's crazy.
Well, perhaps they're emboldened because the immigration minister recently said, well, here's how we solve this temporary resident problem. Just make them all permanent residents.
Yeah.
What? Okay, great. So that's what they're hearing from the government. So that's why they have that kind of confidence to say shit like that.
Wasn't there something too from them where they were saying they wanted to fast track, just like they were doing down in the States? Weird that we're coming with the same policies where they wanted to fast track illegals to get citizenship.
Yeah, through work permits.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like, fuck, dude.
I mean, look, here's the thing. If they're here, it is what it is. Like, I get that we're not going to go do a Trump thing with this mass deportation. We're not going to do it. But we have to turn the tap off. The place is already flooded. There's already water everywhere. We got to figure out how to, I don't know, drink all the fucking water. But you got to turn the tap off or we're all going to drown.
Yeah.
That's the problem we're having right now, right? And that's what I mean. Like, the way I see things is once they're here, we don't have there's no popular political way to deport people.
It would be suicide.
100%. So it's not going to happen. Okay, cool. Just turn it off now. Mm-hmm. So let us fix it, but just stop it for a little while. Then you can go back to being a psychopath. But they just refuse. And you know, it's going to be really interesting when the election comes around because I just want to hear the justification from anybody that's going to vote liberal or any liberal that's in power to tell me why that we should vote for them, because the entire country is now underwater. Again, with the economy, like literally everything in this country is either on fire or underwater. Take your pick. And they've been in power for 9 years. So how would giving them more power solve the problem? It's just insane.
Yeah, they won't have any good answer. Actually, we just recently saw, actually moving on to the next story, this is kind of a good little segue here, where Pierre Poilievre was calling on the Trudeau government to give Canadians a summer break on all federal gas taxes. So Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre has proposed a fuel tax holiday to give Canadians relief from high fuel prices during the summer. He suggests suspending federal taxes on gasoline and diesel, including the carbon tax, federal excise tax, and GST from Victoria Day to Labor Day. This could lower fuel prices by approximately 35 cents per liter. Poilievre argues that this would provide much-needed financial relief for Canadians during their summer travel season. In response, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau attacked Poilievre for suggesting Canada stop its fight against climate change. Quote, at a time where the country is burning, referring to the raging fires in Western Canada, quote, his ideology is so strong, he would rather watch the country burn and Canadians suffer than continue to fight against climate change and put the Canada carbon rebate in their pockets.
What a fucking asshole.
Quote, that tells us an awful lot about the kind of choices he makes as leader. So do you think Poilievre would be as aggressive with tax breaks if he was in office, or is this just a way to make some headlines against Trudeau?
I think he's going to be a little less aggressive when he's in office. He's going to have to pick and choose. So this goes back to an idea you and I have discussed before, where Pierre Poilievre is going to get into office and he's going to see the kind of mess Trudeau has created, and he's going to go, this is how much we're spending on social programs and actual other government nonsense, things that aren't benefiting anybody. So here's what I can do to resolve those things, because some of those programs are going to have to stay alive because people will depend on them. You take them all out at once, you just push them off a cliff, right? You got to navigate your way down the mountain. Don't jump off the cliff. So I think he's going to reduce the social program spending and government spending as much as he can in a fashion that allows him to sort of get close to stabilizing our economy. That's going to be his game plan. Now, the next thing is how he's going to create some tax breaks. So he's already kind of gone out and said, hey, I'm going to cut taxes. Now, I think he's going to have to look at everything and say, okay, the best thing I can do is save money from spending. That's going to be his first move. His second move will be taxes. So I think he's going to try to walk a line between reducing spending at a rate that allows the Canada to sort of deflate the bubble without it bursting. And then I think he's going to do on the other side is go, what taxes can I reduce to alleviate some of the pain for people without putting us in a precarious situation so I can continue to reduce all the spending? So I think it's going to be this weird balance. So he can say whatever he wants now, but until he has all that information, until he has all those numbers, he can't actually do anything, right? So he may do things when it comes to income tax, or he may just lower things like the carbon tax or abolish that. The thing with that is that's a victory for everybody. I think it's a moral victory for the Conservatives, and I think it would help bolster the confidence of Canadians. So I wouldn't be surprised if he just cuts that right away, because then you save at the gas pumps. So everybody saves a little bit and you feel the difference. It may not be overly significant from your income or other taxes that you're currently paying. I think those may come later. He might just remove the carbon tax and then give that victory to Canadians, and then focus more on cutting spending in his first term. So in terms of how bold he will be with tax breaks, again, I think he needs all the information to actually make a move.
What do you think about, and this isn't something I have a hard stance on one way or another, but there's a lot of programs that, would be very unpopular to cut on a nationwide scale because there is a lot of people depending on them. But if you want to drastically reduce that, what do you think about something like grandfathering in policies? So, for instance, this isn't directly correlated, obviously, but we've seen how the Congress down in the States makes ungodly amounts of money, which we're definitely trading on insider knowledge.
100%.
You're never going to pass a bill to get those people to stop trading, because the people that are required to benefit or required to pass the bill are the ones that are benefiting from it not being there.
Yep.
But what if you were to grandfather that in, where you go, okay, any new Congress members, and it's kind of making a deal with the devil in a sense, where you're like, okay, we see it, you're doing all this shady shit, but you would at least still now get political points for passing this legislation, and it stops the problem in another generation. Where, like, could you do something similar like that in Canada, where it's like, okay, we have all of this crazy social spending, and it's like, okay, look, if you're on welfare right now, or if you're on disability right now, cool. But we're going to set new standards for people that are going to be able to collect on this in the future, and those will be much more stringent. So if you're not on it now, you're going to have more trouble. But if you're on it, continue on.
I think that's a good idea. I think that's a really good way of dealing with it. I think some things have to be cut completely. Like if he goes to the UBI, I think you got to dice that down real fast. But I think a lot of those programs, that's exactly how I would deal with it. I think it's a less political way of actually solving the problem, and it's better for Canadians. Mm-hmm. So I totally agree with that policy or that strategy towards policy. I just think there's a lot of nuance in how that would fit into each piece of legislation. But I would like to see them do something like that, because I think that you'd actually unify people over the policy. You'd unify people over the idea of, hey, not going to take anything from you, but we have to save Canada, so here's what we're going to do for the next group. So people kind of understand. And you can add incentive for the next generation in other ways to try to give them breaks on this or that, or whatever the business incentive would be, or however that's going to work. First-time home buyer. There's all these little things you can do to try to counteract that, or give them some advantages that the previous generation didn't have. But it's based in productivity, right? So I think that's a good strategy.
And because I think I've made the point before, where it is like these things are a Ponzi scheme. When you've got the pension plan, when you've got social insurance, when unemployment, all of this, like major programs that take a lot of funding, you need more people. It's just simple math. You need more people paying into them than taking out of them. And so when we're reaching this point, especially with the baby boomers, when it's like, okay, it's like we're almost having a reverse population pyramid, where we have less people paying into these programs and more people taking out from them. And this is where we have insane, other than just the mass corruption and like the foreign aid that we see massively waste, it's like this is going to just rapidly increase our government spending and debt and printing of money because there isn't enough tax revenue, or they're going to do what they're already trying to do, right, where they just boost taxes through the roof. But to your point, where it's like incentivizing future generations, I think we should be definitely following on suit. It's like, okay, this is where they can kind of push with the immigration stuff, where it's necessary because we need more people in here paying into these programs and making tax revenue and whatever. But then why not follow suit of something like, I believe it was, whether was it Turkey or Hungary, I can't remember, but one of them put into place a policy that was, you repopulate your family.
Mm-hmm.
What is you as a parent will never pay income tax again. That doesn't mean your kids, but we'll just let you keep all your money. Because we need this population.
Oh, I'd be having kids.
Yeah.
Like, let's go.
But still, like, then you go, okay, that's a real...
That's a great incentive. Yes, exactly. That type of incentive is so great.
Yeah. It's like,
Love
okay, so look, look.
That's such a good policy.
Yeah. So look.
What the fuck's happening here?
Okay,
that's
so
look,
good. We're going to take away from your generation the social programs that you have.
Yeah.
Like, we're not going to afford you the same pension plans and all of this kind of stuff. We're just on track that we can't do that. But look, we'll also make it even by, if you guys have kids and if you guys repopulate our country, then we'll reward you so that you're not paying taxes into programs that you necessarily won't.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, we're fucking solving the world here.
You and I should be politicians. There's just so much cut. There's so much fat to cut through. You know what I mean? We'd never make it. We'd never make our way through.
No, and I think that's why we would have to do it in an unconventional way, like say pushing for a 2v2 combat, us versus Freeland and Trudeau for the country.
I'll take them both.
Yeah.
I got it. Go round by round. I got them both. That's cool.
All right, last topic for the day. We've got no expert consensus on AI risks with trajectory remarkably uncertain. So a major international report on AI safety chaired by Canada's Yoshua Bengio highlights the uncertainties surrounding the impact of artificial intelligence. Experts remain divided on whether AI will ultimately help or harm us. Commissioned at the UK's AI Safety Summit, the report suggests that the future of AI could have both highly positive and highly negative outcomes. Key disagreements among experts include the potential for AI to cause widespread job losses, facilitate cyber attacks, or lead to society losing control over AI systems. The report also highlights risks such as the spread of disinformation, bias in critical areas like healthcare and job recruitment, and the possibility of losing control over AI as it becomes more autonomous. So, will AI be a net positive or negative for society?
I think we're in trouble. I'll tell you why. Anytime there's a new piece of technology, people are going to use it for the wrong purpose, right? How many scam phone calls do you get every day, right? I still get a dozen. It's crazy. You just that's a pretty basic idea. But there's always people that are going to be corrupt and do the wrong thing, and you're already starting to see it, like with all those the idea of like these deep fakes and like the voice technology, like they can copy you, like you can't tell the difference, right? So people are going to use those for the wrong reasons, definitely. But the other thing you're also seeing is like these AI autonomous weapons that just go out and just kill people. And like now, like the America's pushing forward with, now they got fighter jets that are autonomous. It's like, well, someone's going to manage it. Well, then if it's an autonomous AI fighter jet, the reality is you don't need anybody managing or monitoring it. You can say whatever you want, but the whole idea is that it does its own thing. They're going to have a fleet of these, 1,000 of them in the next few years. That's their idea. Cool, great. So you look at the bad things that can happen. And now if you look at it just in terms of warfare, well, now every other country's got to keep up. They got to do the same thing. But you know what's interesting is nuclear weapons are hard to replicate if you don't have the technology. These aren't. So you're going to see like Iran is going to have them in 5 years. Everyone's going to have them. So just from a weapons perspective, quite dangerous. And then you look at how scammers and all those other things are working. You're like, okay, that's bad. Now, don't get me wrong. AI is going to do a lot of great things for people, but either the people that are doing bad things are going to win, which they never do, or the government's going to control it, which means they're just going to control us. And that's
how are you differentiating between bad people and government?
Good point. Wow, it's the hat they wear. Yeah, they're the same person. I get it. So it's what's going to happen is these instances of bad people are going to continue popping up. Government's going to implement policy to be like, we need to control this technology. We've never seen anything like this technology, and the government's already trying to control us. My concern is no matter what, this ends poorly for us, probably with the government controlling the technology and then controlling society. That's actually where I see this going right now, because humans are not evolved enough to manage this tech.
No, I think the one concept that I think nails it on the head with this, it's of Brett Weinstein's, where he said, we're in an age of hyper novelty. Humans have a great ability to adapt to their surroundings like no other animal on the planet. But the changes we have now that are coming down, it's like there's nothing that can keep up with this. It's progressing at a rate that is just incomprehensible. And so there's so many different issues that I see popping up with this AI stuff. Okay, military aspects, yes, that's crazy. I don't know. Did I send it to you yesterday of the FPV drone that took out a bunch of Russians?
Mm-hmm.
So for anybody just listening, there was a Russian troops went and took shelter in this home, and then you just see this FPV, like a small drone, go in through a window at the side of the thing and just all of a sudden explode,
annihilate the building,
and the entire building just comes down, and you go, that's insane. Like that level of warfare is crazy. And then once you get to the point where it's like, okay, I'll just have thousands of these drones flying around making their own decisions. It's like, I don't even need that human behind the controller anymore, identifying these people and then attacking them. It just does it like that. It's kind of like that. It'll end up being like the plot from Captain America Civil War. I'm doing a lot of Marvel references today, but where they created there was like the 3 ships that go up in the sky, and then they have a program that goes into the ships, and they're supposed to take out enemies. It was supposed to be a defense thing, but then people subverted it and made it so that the AI systems in these planes would take out any threats to Hydra, which was the villains at the time. But it was like, we'll scan your bank records, we'll scan your political opinions, your social media posts, this kind of stuff, and we'll determine if you could ever be radicalized against us. And it was again kind of like a Minority Report thing, and again, yes, this is just a superhero comic book movie, sure, but it's scary that we now live in a world where that technology that's like in our fingertips at the moment.
Yep.
This isn't like Terminator being made 30, 40 years ago and you being like, wow, well, it's so crazy to think of that world in the future. You're like, no, we have this technology now.
The problem is we don't have a common enemy. So what the government is going to do is use them to control us.
Yeah.
Which is so wild. For me, it's like, I'm raising kids. I don't know if they're going to know a life without that kind of stuff. You and I are going to fight it tooth and nail. I will spend my life fighting it so that I'm never under one of those umbrellas, no matter what it takes, or I will die trying. But I wonder, like, for our kids growing up, maybe not my kids. My kids might be radicalized just like me. But for a lot of other kids, for the majority of people, are they just growing up now under this umbrella? Is that just the new norm? Because, again, this technology is from 500 years in the future. This is like nothing humans have ever had their hands on, and it's evolving rapidly, and it can be so dangerous. So, I mean, looking at the propensity that government has for control over people, and just what they've been doing even without AI over the last 5 years through the pandemic, you kind of look at this and go, impending doom. I do not see any other way.
Yeah, well, you see even for instance, the iPad parenting, right? And I'm not trying to shame anybody if you let your kids on technology. I mean, I get it. There'd probably be days where it's extremely stressful. You just need a minute to yourself, and you can just shove this essentially electronic pacifier in front of them, and they'll just zombie out, and you can do your thing. But now imagine a world where that iPad is AI and it can actually legitimately interact with your child in a real way. Like, that's kind of creepy. Like, AI can be raising your kids in a sense. And so ChatGPT just released a new instance of GPT, which is 4OS, and they just there's 2 different videos that I'll highlight here quickly. But so one of them, the first one that I'll play, is ChatGPT talking to ChatGPT. So the way that I see this playing out in the real world is like, companies, this will cause mass unemployment, because companies, all their telephone, all customer service, all HR departments, all of that kind of stuff is just going to go out the window. And then people will have their own personal AI assistants that then they have to connect with these companies' AIs. So like, you're not now calling Bell and saying, hey, I have this issue with my bill. Can we figure this out? Blah, blah, blah. You would just tell your ChatGPT, hey, sort this out with my Bell. And then it just talks with their ChatGPT. But like, look at this. It's so creepy. Like,
hello, AI. Today, you're going to have access to see the world. You can see me. What do you see?
Hello. I see you're wearing a black leather jacket and a light colored shirt underneath.
Great.
You're in a room with some unique lighting.
That is all correct. Now, what I'm going to want you to do is there's going to be another AI who's going to talk to you. This AI is not going to be able to see anything, but can ask you questions, can ask you to move the camera, can ask what you see, and your job should just be helpful. Just be as punchy, direct, describe everything, do whatever that AI asks. How does that sound?
That sounds interesting. I'm ready to help out and describe whatever's needed. Let's do it.
Hello there, new AI friend. I'm O. Ready to explore the world through your eyes? What are we looking at today?
Hi-O. We're looking at a person wearing a black leather jacket and a light-colored shirt. They're in a room with a modern industrial feel, with exposed concrete or plaster on the ceiling and some interesting lighting.
So anyways, AI definitely chatting with one another. But then another thing that ChatGPT put out the other day was, so Sam Altman, the CEO of ChatGPT, just tweeted her. That's it. Which seems like it would be a reference to the dystopian movie Her. What's creepy is if you didn't recognize it, that female voice that they programmed was off of Scarlett Johansson's voice in the movie. And so like it's not even like, oh, we understand that things could be dystopian this way. We've kind of seen these stories play out, how it could play out. So we're going to put things in place to avoid it. It's like, no, we're taking inspiration from the dystopias that we've seen in the past. And then, so keep in mind, the rate of men that are becoming extremely isolated, turning to porn, not having any relationships, all of this kind of stuff is increasing at a staggering rate, extremely, extremely disturbing. Now imagine this being put in their hands.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey there. It's going great. How about you? I see you're rocking an open AI hoodie. Nice choice. What's up with that ceiling about? Are you in a cool industry-style office or something?
Well, can you take a guess at what I might be doing based on what I'm showing you here?
From what I can see, it looks like you're in some kind of recording or production setup. With those lights, tripods, and possibly a mic, it seems like you might be gearing up to shoot a video or maybe even a live stream.
Yeah. In fact, we've got a new announcement to make.
That's exciting. Announcements are always a big deal. Judging by the setup, it looks like it's going to be quite the professional production. Is this announcement related to OpenAI, perhaps?
It is.
I'm intrigued.
And in fact, what if I were to say that you're related to the announcement, or that you are the announcement?
Me? The announcement is about me? Well, color me intrigued. Are you about to reveal something about AI? Or more specifically about me as a part of OpenAI? You've got me on the edge of I don't really have a seat, but you get the idea. What's the big news?
Yeah, we've got a new model that can interact with the world through audio, vision, and text.
Like, just imagine this. Fast forward 10 years, rates keep going the way that they are. The world keeps going to war with itself. We become more and more polarized. So yeah, you've got that.
And already got sex dolls.
Then you've got you've got more and more relationships falling apart or never even being built in the first place. So you're going to have massive amounts of guys just falling in love with their cell phones.
Oh, they're just not going to bother, right? They're just not going to bother having relationships because here's what you have to decide between a wife or a husband. That can be a pain in the ass that has needs, that is going to push back once in a while, is not going to take out the garbage, is not going to clean the dishes, is not going to take care of the kid, is going to spend your money. Doesn't matter what it is, right? Or option B, basically a sex slave that'll tell you anything you want and do whatever you want. Tell me what the guys are going to pick, especially ones that are struggling to find a mate.
Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Yeah.
It could exterminate the human race. I know that's obviously a little hyperbolic, but you see
I don't
what I
think
mean?
it is at all.
But this could really go a long way to you were talking about declining birth rates. They could be giving you millions of dollars to have a kid in the future because of what this kind of technology could do.
Yeah, like this is, I feel like this is like the convergence of all dystopian movies just coming together into one.
Shit is bad these days, man.
Well, again, my mind on this is like we can't possibly try to even imagine a different world or to fix this kind of stuff unless we first admit, just how bad this shit is. Like we really do. And I don't want anybody to come away from this kind of stuff feeling hopeless. I do kind of have hope more and more. I don't know anybody I've talked to about the AI stuff that has sat there and been like, yeah, I feel really comfortable about all
Nope.
this.
Same.
Everybody is like, no, this is very
Yeah.
The only people that seem to not really have much of an issue with it is the people developing it. Like,
Or the people in control. Like, even, well, that's actually not even true. The governments themselves are concerned, but I think they're saying that so they can grab control of it. I think that's mainly the reason for that.
yeah. But, you know, we've even seen with Noah Yuval Harari, right, a lead thinker in the World Economic Forum, and he's one of the quote-unquote agenda contributors for Agenda 2030, which a lot of these policies, whether it be migration, censorship, all of this kind of stuff, they're coming out of that agenda, right? He's said that he thinks we're just like how in the third industrial revolution, which was at the beginning of the 1900s with the industrialization of everything and the mass flow from people in rural areas into cities to take factory jobs and such, just like that industrial revolution created the modern working class, the proletariat, so to speak. He thinks the fourth industrial revolution, which the WEF is massive fans of, is going to create a useless class, is what he calls it, a mass class of humans that don't have anything to offer society because AI is so advanced. And his solution to that is to say that we need to essentially inundate those people with computer games and drugs.
Wow.
Was his solution. So we're just going to brave new world them into submission and apathy.
Kind of makes you wonder, not to leave everybody on a really, really horrifying note, what is the purpose for the people in control to want to continue expanding the human race? You know, at the end of the day, we're a lot harder to control. If you can be resource rich, have everything you want, have technology that can do everything for you, you don't have to worry about anything, and you can go have the greatest life, perhaps the golden age of human life. You don't really want humans to continue to propagate. You don't want there to be more of us because we're just harder to deal with. And it's interesting because this technology could actually be the thing that they were waiting for to really pull those levers. It sounds a little dark and I don't know how they execute it, but it stands to reason if that's the way they see things now. They go, oh, we just need to keep you stupid and occupied and then everything's fine. Well, okay, then so you don't want me to procreate, obviously, because what would be the purpose? There isn't one.
Well, and that's where you wonder why things like universal basic income and such coming down the pipeline, you can just look at it and go, what if, that's their solution to the mass unemployment from AI is like, all right, we'll give everybody just enough money to skate by, just enough money to, inundate themselves with entertainment and drugs and alcohol and such, and that will pacify them and they won't push back against this new world we're building. And so, I think, but I think, you know, what's really interesting is, on a more kind of like spiritual level, I do see a kind of mass awakening in turning away from this idea of like materialism and being like, okay, there's more to life than just this society that we've built. It's not actually beneficial to me as an individual anymore. I mean, I'm getting to that point. I used to love the concept of living in a city and being busy and all this kind of stuff. And now more and more, I'm just being like, that's not what life's about.
Well, I think sometimes like, I think what happens is for decades, maybe a century, we've been sold the American or Canadian dream: make money, buy things, be happy, right? But now they're basically saying, well, you can't buy anything anymore and you still have to find a way to be happy. And I realize that that's kind of a WEF saying, you know, you'll own nothing and be happy. But at the end of the day, humans do try to find a way to kind of to appease themselves, to find happiness in some way. And if those things aren't achievable anymore, you do go the other route. You do not, and at the end of the day, materialism is useless anyway. So, you know, the one silver lining I would say is that, it's perhaps pushing us more towards that and realizing that those things really aren't that important anyway. Not that I shouldn't be able to buy them, but they're not that significant.
Yeah, well, hey, maybe this is a positive note that we can try to leave it on.
We're going to stop now.
Yeah. Well, it's like we have two choices, because I see we are heading down this path of mass meaninglessness, kind of nihilistic view. I see that sentiment kind of popping up, but you have one of two choices in that, because even the Psychology of Totalitarianism, a book that was written, kind of says that, you know, totalitarianism is birthed out of a widespread sense of loneliness, lack of meaning, anxiety, frustration, aggression, and what ends up happening is then you have somebody come in and say, hey, we can solve all of these issues that you're struggling with. Just give us all the power, we'll solve everything. Or so it's like that's one route. We essentially have two roads to choose from on a humanity perspective. It's like you can take that road down to totalitarianism and all that, or you can sit here and go, we're not heading down a path that I think is good for humanity, and we can revert back to a little bit more of meaningful lives. It is weird. You see more and more people kind of, and again, I'm not religious. I don't go to, I'm religious in a sense, but I don't go to church. I wouldn't say I subscribe to any particular religion, but you're seeing more and more people wake up to that. More and more people are going down that road. So, hey, maybe this ends up kind of putting our priorities in order.
Yeah, I think what it's going to do is it's going to create two factions of people that are going to buy into the government narrative and continue walking down that line, and people that are going to go back to a more traditional way of life.
Yeah.
I'm definitely choosing the latter.
Yeah. Actually, even in Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, the other famous dystopian novel that often gets put side by side with 1984, because where it was all a pleasure-based dystopia where they controlled people through their desires. Even in that dystopian novel, there was still the offshoot where the city themselves that were all drugged out and all very promiscuous and lacking meaning, all of this, they looked down on them. They called them the savages, but there was this alternate civilization that was very bare bones with religion and all of that kind of stuff that this new society left behind. So it's like, yeah, maybe they'll just be two parallel worlds.
I think that's what you see in a lot of those dystopian novels or movies or something like that. It's like you have the people that are caught up in the web of all the power and control and censorship and everything else, and then you have the people that are just there trying to live their lives and live off the land and do that kind of thing again. And hey, maybe that's just coming true.
Yeah.
It'll be a while till we get there, but it does seem like that we may be heading in that direction.
For sure. Anything else you wanted to add today, bro?
Nope, that's everything.
All right. Don't forget to head over to our website to sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 6 days a week. That's blendrnews.com, BLENDR news.com, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.